sports, they say numbers never lie, but odds are they do. Sam Steinmeyer, Brady Archer, and host Andrew Botwinik are about to go against the grain this week as we make our day-to-day picks. All views and opinions expressed in today's show do not reflect KZLX or Northwest Missouri State University. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Everybody get...
What are they going to rule it? He caught it! Touchdown!
And welcome back to Day-to-Day Picks. Andrew Botwinik, Sam Steinmeyer. We mentioned before the break, we kind of teased into this one we talked college basketball, we talked the NBA world. Now we're moving into a league that almost didn't happen because of the CBA contract, the NFL, and that would have been something, Sam, because we really wouldn't have had anything, because I know now with all this stuff in the offseason for the NFL, everybody is getting up to date, and I think that's where the majority of sports fans have kind of hit right there, just into that niche of just everything that's going on with rumors and circulations. And the NFL is really the only sporting world where it's impacted still, but it's still going on.
Yeah, you don't really have anything being postponed besides the NFL draft. I mean, obviously free agency and all that is not going to get postponed because of the coronavirus. So, we still have all these deals and, contracts coming out in the trades. And so it's been nice to have a little bit of sports normalcy with all this stuff going on.
Well, and we'll start with some of the news. We won't really start with the biggest name, but we'll start with the most recent name. Literally just during the break, the Rams were looking to deal Todd Gurley, try and get something out of him. There were a lot of rumors this whole week about him and the Rams moving forward. He had the knee problems. He wasn't healthy this whole season. I know last season C.J. Anderson took the bulk of running and rushing yards with the Rams.
Wasn't Malcolm Brown?
Malcolm Brown kind of did this year as well, too.
So
C.J. Anderson was last year.
Yeah.
I guess technically 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
C.J.
Anderson did not play with the Rams last year. So, yeah, it's crazy. I know Todd Gurley had the knee problems, but you figured the Rams were fully committed to getting him healthy 100%, still playing him. But now I guess they like what they see in Malcolm Brown and, are willing to give up Todd Gurley, who was, before all these knee problems came around, was probably one of the top running backs in the NFL. I don't know about best, but one of the top three probably.
And the Rams initially looking to trade Todd Gurley during the free agent period. Now they are not. They're looking to release him. And, in fact, they have released Todd Gurley already. They are cutting him, and they're expected to pay an additional $10.5 million to Todd Gurley this season. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes moving forward. I know there are some interesting spots, and I have a good place in mind already where he's going to try and go to first, and it involves around the biggest name in all of free agency this year, Tom Brady. He has left New England. He is officially, I guess, I don't know if it's official yet, but everything's pretty much already lined up, set, cold in stone. Tom Brady will be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer this season. He is moving down south with Bruce Arians, the quarterback whisperer, and he's going to have I don't think he'll have to whisper too often to Tom Brady.
I don't think so either. It's crazy how we're going to see, you see all the Photoshops and by all the major sports news outlets on Twitter and stuff, and all these, showing Tom Brady in a Buccaneer jersey, and it's so weird to see. It's so weird to look at that he's not going to be in a New England Patriots uniform, and it's so. You see all the videos of all these, New England fans who are so upset, and, guaranteed Tom Brady wasn't going to leave. Well, Brady's left, and now he's going to Tampa Bay, of all places. Maybe he'll take some games in at the Trop, maybe, if there's ever games there.
Yeah, exactly. And the core that Tom Brady is about to step into is unlike anything he's had in New England the past couple of years. He's had some good cores in New England with Randy Moss, obviously, and Wes Welker, Julian Edelman being one of the few outliers from this season that were actually good, Gronkowski as well. But this year he'll have Mike Evans, he'll have Chris Godwin, he'll have O.J. Howard, he'll have a lot.
O.J. Howard, everyone talks about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. O.J. Howard's kind of gone over everyone's head. He is a Gronk-type tight end who's good. Like, coming out of the draft, coming out of Alabama, obviously I didn't have the show, but I was thinking, O.J. Howard could be good. And, he hasn't really shown it on the field, but it could be in part to his quarterback, too.
He had some games last year where he really sparked productivity-wise, and I think that now with Tom Brady, he's going to get a lot more looks, especially with how they utilize tight ends, and that's where I think Todd Gurley comes into the mix potentially, where I think that Tom Brady and the Buccaneers might be Todd Gurley's first call. He might call them first just because their running back-wise in Tampa is not great.
Peyton Barber is, I think, their
Peyton
starter.
Barber, and they have some other name that I can't remember, but though they're not the greatest, I think they only had 2 games this season where the rushers ran for over 100 yards individually.
Ronald Jones,
That's what it is, yeah, Ronald Jones.
So I think, obviously their weak point is the running back, and, if they had a strong running back this past year, they might have made the playoffs. Jameis Winston was playing, he was throwing a lot of interceptions, but he was also throwing a lot of touchdowns. So they went 8-8 with a quarterback who went 30 for 30, and Tom Brady's not going to go 30 for 30. He is precise with where he throws it. He's not going to throw a lot of interceptions. So I think, the Buccaneers, I don't know if it's going to be tough to beat the Saints in that division, but I think they're in a prime spot to get one of the many wild card spots that are now in play.
Well, yeah, and with the CBA, they're most likely going to get into the playoffs 100% just because of the extra team added on both sides. And that division, though, will be the hardest division to win just because you mentioned you had Tampa Bay, you have the Saints, Carolina Panthers, who have Christian McCaffrey, and now Teddy Bridgewater. And then you still have the Falcons. I know, obviously, they're not as good as they were a couple years ago, but Matt Ryan, Julio Jones is still there. Sadly, they just released Devontae Freeman a couple of days ago, but that's another name for a team that could
Austin
make a way.
Hooper as well.
Hooper, yeah. So that division is going to be interesting to keep an eye on. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I think that division has had the most change, I would think.
Yeah, with coaching changes and now player changes, definitely a lot of moving parts in that division. And, last year it was probably one of the toughest divisions to play in, and now it's just going to be the same this year. It's not really one of the divisions that's cut and dry.
And before we get into some of the other quarterback talk, because that's pretty much what has really been the most interesting, the Rams are not done after Todd Gurley. They released just now Clay Matthews as well. So Todd Gurley and Clay Matthews now on the outside looking in, just kind of players that were making that, especially Clay Matthews, a playoff push, come in, get a ring, leave. Now it looks like since they didn't make the playoffs, I think under the new CBA they would have been that last team in the playoffs on the NFC side, but he'll probably most likely be looking for a new spot to land. And with the amount of money that he's probably going to ask, I'm not sure off the top of my head who would, because I know there are plenty of teams that need linebackers, but teams like the Chiefs that really need linebackers, they're not going to be willing to pay Clay Matthews as much as I think he'll want.
Yeah, Clay Matthews, his age is kind of showing on the field. I don't think he should command the amount of money he is gonna. I think maybe he thinks that way just because of the name itself, Clay Matthews. You think, oh, he's a great linebacker, but not really anymore because of, obviously with age, play deteriorates. And, not to say he was bad last year, because by no means was he bad, but still Clay Matthews, probably on the downward part of his career, only a couple more years left in the league, and then he'll probably retire. So
I think so too. And we'll take now a look at the outside, some of the other quarterbacks that moved around. Phillip Rivers went from the Chargers now to the Colts, and I think that was one that a lot of people had pegged from a couple weeks ago. That was the most likely landing spot for him to go. I think Tampa Bay was one of the other spots that everybody kind of looked at, but with Tom Brady sliding in there, it kind of looked all but wrapped up for Phillip Rivers.
That's what I thought. I thought Phillip Rivers was either going to retire or go to the Buccaneers because he moved his family down to Florida from San Diego. Never was in Los Angeles, but I thought the Buccaneers are done because, I didn't feel like he'd move away from his family. But now going to Indianapolis, playing with the Colts, I think that's a good spot for him because, they do have weapons still. And, he had weapons in Los Angeles with the Chargers, but you have a good coach in Frank Reich, and so that seems like a good landing spot for him.
I've been talking with one of the few residential Colts fans here in Maryville at Northwest, Colton Imsweiler, and I was telling him it's kind of the same situation that the Chiefs were in for a couple of years. You've got other pieces that are moving around. Teams you're getting more pieces. You've got the running back. You've got some of the wide receivers, T.Y. Hilton. You've got the tight end and the guy
Eric Ebron.
Yeah, Ebron. I couldn't remember his name.
Breakout year last year.
He did really well, and he was playing really well with the Lions beforehand, but now he's with the Colts. He's playing well. You've got some great players on defense. You make even bigger trade to get DeForest Buckner just a couple of days. I think that was after Phillip Rivers went there, but you've got the pieces now. You've got kind of the same situation that the Chiefs were in. You've got some of the younger guys that fit well. The only question mark at the time, and this was the Chiefs from a couple of years ago, you've got the Alex Smith at quarterback and Phillip Rivers. You've got a guy that can get you far, but I don't know if that's enough to get to the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl. And now the Colts are just looking for that next guy up. And I think it's the same situation that the Chiefs were in, because you look at some of the quarterbacks that are coming in the next couple of years, Trevor Lawrence, I almost said Dwayne Haskins. It's the guy that it's Justin Fields. Justin Fields, his successor at Ohio State. You've got some of those guys that are playing well. You can potentially bring one of those guys in as a younger guy that could bridge that gap. It's almost like Phillip Rivers is just there, kind of waiting. He's good enough to get you to the playoffs. He's good enough to get you to potentially a conference championship, but I don't know if he's good enough to make it to the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl, just because Phillip Rivers is getting up there in age. He's not as lethal as he was. He's not as mobile. I think that was something that stood out with Alex Smith, is even though he was a really good pocket passer, from time to time he could get outside of the pocket and he can make some plays with his legs. Not all the time. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson by any means, but he can pick up a 10-yard scramble if he's left wide open.
Yeah, Alex Smith, and when Alex Smith came to Kansas City, he was a lot young. I feel like he's a lot younger than Phillip Rivers is now.
Oh, yeah.
So there is that. Phillip Rivers doesn't have the same amount of time that Alex Smith had in Kansas City. I think only maybe 2 years max is what Rivers is going to have in Indianapolis before that next guy comes in, whether it's someone through the draft or Jacoby Brissett. So be interesting to see, but definitely Phillip Rivers is, he had some troubles last year. Maybe he can fix that, be good enough to get the Colts to the playoffs. They definitely have the defense for it. They definitely have the weapons. Now they just need Phillip Rivers to play well.
And they were able to trade the day after that they got Phillip Rivers. They trade that first-round 13th overall pick, who everybody thought was pegged to be Jordan Love. The Colts trade that pick to the 49ers to get DeForest Buckner. I don't know why I had Armstead in there. I had it wrong on the rundown, just because they have so many good defensive linemen there in San Francisco. But
they really do.
DeForest Buckner, the guy that was traded to Indianapolis, I think that's a good move. You get the quarterback that you want for the time being. You trade it away. You get someone else that's good. You don't really need that 13th overall pick to get another quarterback to sit behind both Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett, because you still have Brissett.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see what the 49ers do with that pick, because they don't need a quarterback. They have Jimmy Garoppolo. So whether they maybe even try to move that pick and try to get another good player in there. So it'll be interesting to see, because Jimmy Garoppolo isn't going anywhere. I know there was rumors of Tom Brady wanting to go to San Francisco, but that was kind of snuffed out at the beginning of free agency. So I'd look to see maybe 49ers move that pick.
I think they would. The 49ers are an interesting spot now.
Unless they try to find someone to replace DeForest Buckner or someone like that.
And I don't even think they would do that, because really there's not a whole lot of defensive line talent aside from the first couple of guys off the draft board. There are some good ones at the top, but outside of those couple of guys, it's not an in-depth draft. And even at 13, the guys that are at the top are probably going to get picked before them. If anything, they might try and package a deal later on to try and get something, but the 49ers, they're right there. Obviously, they made it to the Super Bowl. They gave the Chiefs a run for their money at the beginning of that game and just kind of crumbled there towards the end. They don't need any. There's not an outstanding piece that they're saying this is what separates the 49ers from winning a Super Bowl. There's nothing that's really like that, so they're probably just trying to get the best bang for their buck, essentially. So that's kind of what's going on with the Colts as well. Another quarterback that's getting on, well, before we get into the other big trade, Marcus Mariota signed with the Raiders. He will probably be the backup to Derek Carr, but it'll be interesting to see what Gruden decides to do with Mariota, because there's a lot of times where I could see Carr having a struggling game and Mariota just gets thrown in.
Yeah, it seemed like more last year than anything that Derek Carr and Gruden kind of bumped heads. And, Gruden, when he first came in, said, I love Derek Carr, he's my quarterback. But now it's looking like if he has another bad season like he had last year, throw in Marcus Mariota there. He's a guy who can run. With Josh Jacobs at the running back, you could see maybe they go to, I know it's a West Coast style offense, John Gruden, but maybe he's try to throw some, read option type stuff in there and, work with Josh Jacobs. And, also, they got two tight end, probably going to have two tight end sets now as Jason Witten has joined the Las Vegas Raiders now. Nearly said Oakland.
I think I might have.
As now he joins Darren Waller in that. I think that's his name.
Waller, yeah.
Waller, as he goes into that tight end room now, and that's good for Darren Waller to have to learn from probably one of the best tight ends in NFL history, is because he had a great year last year. He had a really good year, and now he's just going to get better by learning from one of the greats. So I think that was a very good pickup for the Raiders.
I think it was you and I that talked about this as well. Just the Raiders are probably going to utilize two tight ends, like you said, and just having that veteran presence. Even if he doesn't play much, Witten, he's still able to be there, help Waller with his route running, help him with blocking scheme potentially, because Waller could be one of the top tight ends in the league. And
Definitely.
I wholeheartedly think that there's a lot of bigger names, Kelsey, Kittle being the top two in the league right now, Rudolph as well. So he's got a lot of waves to make to get up to there, compete with that level, but having Witten as a mentor isn't really going to set you too far back, and that's something to keep an eye on here. We're going to take a look now specifically at the AFC West here on KZLX LP Maryville. The West, in terms of the AFC, quarterbacks have kind of changed and shifted around. Obviously, the one that hasn't changed is Patrick Mahomes at the top of the AFC West. Derek Carr, we mentioned, with now Marcus Mariota backing him up. That's something to keep an eye on. Joe Flacco, released earlier today from the Broncos. That probably put no surprise on anybody's faces. Drew Lock was already given the reins at the end of the season. He was going to be getting the nod to start for the rest of this season as well. So that's almost all but solidifies Drew Lock being the starting quarterback for the Broncos this year. And then the last quarterback as of right now, Tyrod Taylor for the Los Angeles Chargers. They have said that they're going to keep Tyrod Taylor in that spot potentially, but I could also see the Chargers drafting a quarterback or moving something around potentially to try and get someone else. But Tyrod Taylor kind of showed his worth in Buffalo a couple of years ago, but since then he played a half a season with the Browns and then was a backup this last season.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of who the Chargers are going to go with is interesting because they have the weapons. They have a really good defense now with the moves they've made. Chris Harris Jr., Linval Joseph, and so now trying to find the quarterback for all those weapons because they still have Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry. They still have a lot of weapons on that offense, and so maybe trying to. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of rumors around where Cam Newton is going to go. A lot of people thought Chicago. And then you mentioned before the show New England is interested. I'm sure the Chargers would be interested, but they kind of have two holes right now. Or I guess not. I forgot Austin Eckler. They said they don't have a hole at running back. I was going to mention Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon still hasn't signed, but Austin Eckler's been given the money, and I think that's if I was the Chargers, that's the same move that I would make. Eckler proved himself in the first 4 games of the season last year, and for him to put up almost MVP-like numbers for a quarter of the season and then get benched for the rest of it, I would have liked to see what Eckler could have done there, and I think now we're going to get to see that. Outside of that, though, you mentioned all the weapons that they have on defensive side. You still have Derwin James. You still have Bosa. You still have Casey Hayward. You've got all these big-name players on defense. You've got Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry on offense, Austin Eckler still. The offense looks good. The defense looks good, too. It's just
that quarterback.
Find the guy that can make the right plays. And Tyrod Taylor, in that offense is going to look a lot different than Phillip Rivers. Expect a lot more read option, RPO type stuff. That's going to be something that's changed, and there's going to be a lot more different looks that this Chargers team is going to have moving forward, definitely this year.
Definitely, and if they Tyrod Taylor and somehow they get Cam Newton, definitely same type of quarterback. Just Newton's a little bit bigger, so yeah, it's going to be a very different Los Angeles Chargers offense. You have a mobile quarterback now who's maybe doesn't have the arm as Phillip Rivers, but has the wheels, and so that opens up a lot of avenues.
And then outside of those names in the AFC West, we'll take a look now. We mentioned Teddy Bridgewater. He's now with the Carolina Panthers. Cam Newton's still under contract with the Panthers. They're looking to move him somewhere as well. Nick Foles, we mentioned, with the Chicago Bears. He is now, Nick Foles, been traded from the Jaguars to the Bears. He will probably be their starting quarterback, I would imagine.
I don't know.
I don't think they'll start Mitch Trubisky over Nick Foles.
They seem pretty dead set on Mitch Trubisky. Chicago does. So I think Nick Foles is kind of a scenario where it's a Carson Wentz type, where you have the young quarterback. Nick Foles is going to be there if he gets injured, but I think Chicago is dead set on Mitch Trubisky.
And we'll see what happens with that. I think you could be right, but Chicago is kind of in that weird spot where either one of those guys could start and produce almost the same season. There's not really a big difference.
Or Nick Foles could go Philadelphia mode and get them to a Super Bowl.
Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see moving forward. They still have Khalil Mack. They still have a good defense. They're still poised defensively. They just need that offensive spark. That offense looks a little bit dry. They need to boost it up a little bit, which leaves Gardner Minshew in Jacksonville, the starter that all the fans wanted. I don't think he's ready for it yet, but the fans think he is, and I think that's where Sean Codd wants to go.
Yeah, and Minshew Mania is going to run wild in Jacksonville unless I don't know what pick they have, but unless they want to get another quarterback. But it seems like they're dead set on Gardner Minshew. I don't know if he can be a great quarterback in the NFL, but we'll see. They still have Leonard Fournette. It's going to be a rough year, I think, next year for the Jaguars. They don't have very many weapons. The defense is kind of all picked out. Calais Campbell getting traded to the Baltimore Ravens, and then also earlier last year, Jalen Ramsey, and now A.J. Bouye also gone. So it's I think the Jaguars has fallen from grace because, just a couple of years ago they were in the AFC Championship. Now I think it's going to be a real struggle for them next year.
I think they definitely went into that rebuild mode. There really wasn't much. The sad thing is they went into rebuild mode after Blake Bortles left. So I'm not saying that was what was holding them together as the glue, but Blake Bortles, I don't know, man.
Got him to an AFC Championship.
Outside of that, though, the only other quarterback that I have pegged, I guess there's two technically, just because he's more of a local guy, Chase Daniels signs with the Lions on a pretty decent-sized deal. He's probably one of the best paid backups in the league has ever seen.
That's going to be a great job.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it is. He's kind of moved around from place to place. He won a ring. He's got one ring with New Orleans. He's big living. He's big living out there in the NFL. And the only other name that we haven't seen a lot of that I think could get really dicey in the next couple of weeks is Taysom Hill. Came out a couple weeks ago and said that he wanted to get either the starting spot if Drew Brees didn't come back or to move somewhere else. And there's a couple of teams that still have a spot open. I think the only thing that I wouldn't want to see, and this is a long shot of it happening, I don't want Taysom Hill with Bill Belichick.
Neither do I.
I don't want him anywhere near New England.
But I think now that Teddy Bridgewater has moved on to Carolina, I think Taysom Hill's like, okay, I don't have any more competition. When Drew's ready, it's my position.
I think so too, and I think it'd be interesting to see what the Saints do with Taysom Hill. I don't think he leaves either, but at the same time, I think that if Sean Payton and the
Bill
owners
Belichick
get
comes calling with a good deal, they might take it, and that's not good.
I think that if the right deal comes, they'll take it and they'll worry about that in the next season or something if that is to happen, because the Saints still have some time. I believe Drew Brees signed a 2-year deal.
I think so.
$25 million each year, so it looks like he's still likely to be there for another year at least. So that'll be the only other quarterback that I think news has happened. I can't think of anybody else that I know Kirk Cousins signed an extension, but that's not really noteworthy because he's still going to play terrible there.
Dak Prescott got franchise tagged. They gave him the $33 million option, $33 million per year. He didn't take it. He thinks he's worth $40 million, so they gave him the tag. He's still getting quite a good bit amount of money on the tag, but still, Dak Prescott probably doesn't like that. And so now this year is going to be the audition year for Mike McCarthy, and 2, the year where he proves that he's a $40 million quarterback. I personally don't think he is. I think he should have took the $33 million. I think that's, a fair deal, but apparently he didn't. So, and then also Dallas signing Amari Cooper for probably, the better half of his career, 5 years, $100 million. So getting Amari Cooper locked up, and there's also been some rumblings of a potential Emmanuel Sanders deal, and there's also been a lot of Dez Bryant rumors, but those are just rumors for now. But as of all the Dallas Cowboys stuff, that's really about it.
And I think that's the Amari Cooper thing is a pretty good deal. It fits everybody about what they wanted. That's kind of what he wants. That's kind of what the rest of the team wants moving forward. Mm-hmm. That's a good deal on both sides.
He did say, he wants to be a Cowboy for life. He did field offers. I think the Packers gave him an offer. I think the Redskins gave him an offer, and I think the Eagles gave him an offer. But he decided to turn all that down and come back with the Cowboys, which makes me and Austin and Nolan pretty happy.
And I think moving forward, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Dak Prescott, but I think he does stay. It would be stupid for them not to try and figure something out, and I think all of the holding out will eventually come down to clear out.
Yeah, I think that they definitely will, come to a deal. Just maybe, Dak Prescott probably is going to get close to the $40 million range. They've already tried to reason with him and, give him a sizable deal, but below what he thinks he's worth. He, decided to go against it, so he's coming back on the franchise tag and, has a year to improve his stock.
And moving a little bit on the other side, still in that Texas area, though, we saw another huge deal get done. I think this
the first one that started everything.
And this is, I believe this is the biggest deal probably of the whole offseason in terms of trade. But the Texans trade away DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals for David Johnson. Other than that, though, the Houston Texans also, along with David Johnson, get a 2020 second-round pick and a 2021 fourth-round pick. The Cardinals get DeAndre Hopkins as well as a 2020 fourth-round pick. ESPN, this is what I think is kind of funny with the way that the Texans have been going. The Cardinals on this grade, ESPN grades them out at getting a B+. The Texans an F.
I mean, I think that's pretty accurate because they gave him away for some table scraps. David Johnson, not the running back he used to be, a second and a fourth. You don't even get a first-round pick for the best wide receiver in the NFL. That's really tough. And now Kyler Murray's got a lot of weapons now. He's got Kenyon Drake, who's a good back. He played great in the few weeks that he was there last year. And you have DeAndre Hopkins, who doesn't really need a lot of mentoring, but you have Larry Fitzgerald there to kind of guide him along, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid, which he hasn't done in his career so far. I don't think he'll start now, but that really helps out Kyler Murray a lot.
And it was the day after, I believe, that the Cardinals gave Kenyon Drake the transition tag or the franchise tag, whatever kind of tag it was. That was the day after, so it was kind of like once that happened, everybody kind of kept an eye and they were like, oh, this is something that's serious. They're going to probably move one of them because that was what it was at the deadline. They traded to get Kenyon Drake from the Dolphins, and everybody was kind of like, ooh, with David Johnson there, how's that going to work? And now they have DeAndre Hopkins, and I think Larry Fitzgerald, DeAndre Hopkins, as well as I'm blanking on the other guy, Andy Isabella. Andy Isabella is a younger guy, a second-year player. He's going to be pretty well in that offense.
Also the one from Texas A&M. Can't think of his name.
We'll figure it out here. Yeah. That's what we have Google for. I can't remember his name either, but you're going to say it and I'm going to know immediately.
Yeah. Christian Kirk.
He's another speedy guy. Him and Isabella both. But the Cardinals look to be potentially making some moves. It's just interesting because that division already has the San Francisco 49ers, the Seattle Seahawks, and then the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll see what happens with that division as well.
The Rams kind of clearing house, though, and so it seems like maybe they're going into a small rebuild. So maybe the Cardinals can jump then, because they showed in the latter half of the year that they're a good. They were not a terrible team at all last year. They were just maybe a little rusty because the rookie quarterback. They didn't have a very good offensive line, which now in the draft they'll probably get that good offensive lineman to anchor that O-line going forward. They have a good running back now, 2 good wide receivers. So they're set up, and now I think it's really mainly the defense that's got to step up.
And I think for the Rams, as much as I gave them last year for not making the playoffs and how I pegged that the team was going to be good but not good enough, I don't think they're in a rebuild mode. They cut Gurley, yes. He didn't really get a whole lot of productivity last year. They moved in a different way with Malcolm Brown. Clay Matthews was hurt for the majority of the season. He really didn't play well. It's kind of just the Rams are doing what I think is essentially trimming the fat. They're just kind of cutting some pieces off that don't really fit too well, clearing up some money while paying some money of the way as well, but they really haven't made any adjustments. Aaron Donald's still there. They still have Jared Goff. They still have all of the wide receivers, Cooper Kupp. They still have potential for that. So this is a team that it's a tough division, and I don't think they'll make the playoffs again even with this new CBA deal. I think they're still on the outside looking in on the NFC side, but it'll be interesting to see moving forward what does happen with this Rams team.
Yeah, the Rams defense did take a little bit of a hit. Dante Fowler decided to go to Atlanta, so they did lose one piece, but they still have Aaron Donald. They still have a lot of good pieces on that defense, so not too worried about that. So I don't know about not. It's going to be really tough to not make the playoffs now. If they are one of the better teams in the NFC West, so will be interesting to see how that division shapes out, because it's definitely going to be a lot more competitive now with DeAndre Hopkins going to Arizona.
And the only other big deal that I can think of outside of those ones that we've mentioned, Stephon Diggs, he is now a Buffalo Bill. That was something that was kind of brought to attention of NFL and football fans when Kirk Cousins signed his extension. Diggs was very upset earlier this year with the amount of targets, or little of targets, I guess, he was receiving with everything that was going on. To be fair, they do have Rudolph. They do have Thielen. They've got plenty of other names to get in there.
I don't think he was upset about that. Receptions going to other receivers. I think he was a little upset about the amount of times they're giving the ball to Dalvin Cook, whether it's through the air or on the ground. They weren't during the first part of the year. They weren't doing much with the throwing game, so I think that's what got him upset. Now he's got a quarterback with a big arm, but does have some accuracy issues. But Josh Allen, still, he can throw the ball deep, and Stephon Diggs is a deep ball threat, so I think it's a great fit.
And yeah, I think now that offense in Buffalo looks all right. This is a team that with Frank Gore, Father Time, behind the quarterback in there, that team already made the playoffs, and now without Brady, I think it's their division to lose.
Probably now, and now you have a clear-cut number one wide receiver. That's no discredit to John Brown. John Brown was great last year. He's just not really that wide receiver one type.
He's still young, I think, too.
He's still young, and he's a good number 2 option, I think. He's not really quite ready yet to go on that number 1 receiver. He had a great year last year, but now most of the opportunity is going to go to Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is going to be the number 1 option, but that still clears up. Everyone's going to be focusing on him. John Brown's still going to get open and get targets.
So it'll be interesting to see what moves forward. I think that's just about everything. I can't think of anything else that kind of happened.
Right before, I think today, Darius Slay to the Eagles.
Oh, yes.
So now they step up that defensive secondary. So Darius Slay, when the Lions brought in, I believe they brought someone in for that secondary. He tweeted out, "Good for him. Now I'm looking to get a trade." So he got that trade, and now he's part of the Eagles, which I don't like because that's now he's probably going to be the one to guard Amari Cooper now. So Darius Slay, a very good defensive back.
And that was something that Tyrann Mathieu on Twitter was saying, that he really liked the way that Darius Slay was able to play man essentially 99% of the time and play it well. There's really not very often times where he was getting beat He looked really well, especially in that struggling Detroit Lions team. That was something to keep an eye on. Another thing that's happening in the NFL, Josh Gordon says that he is intending to play this year. Obviously, the CBA and all the stuff about the drug deals for marijuana are kind of scrapped off the table. Josh Gordon is intending to want to play this season. Some of the other notable free agents that are still available, Jadeveon Clowney, that's a big-name guy. Robbie Anderson for the Jets, that's something to keep an eye on. Jason Peters. Jameis Winston, I think he's the only other quarterback that's a big-name guy. Everson Griffin, Emmanuel Sanders, Logan Ryan, Eric Ebron, we mentioned him with the Colts. He's still technically a free agent. I believe he'll sign back, though. That's just something to keep an eye on.
Phillip Rivers coming to the team now.
I would hope so. I would hope he wants to come back to play with that. Desmond Trufant was the name you were looking for earlier with the other safety in Detroit. He was a guy that signed earlier.
Desmond Trufant.
Carl Joseph signed with the Browns. I was trying to think of his name. I'm trying to look at some of the other deals just to kind of look through. Bruce Irvin is back with Seattle. Nothing really surprising there.
I know the Bengals have kind of upped their offensive line. They signed someone, I don't know where from, but I know they've signed a couple, one being Suafile from the Cowboys, so they're kind of bolstering up their offensive line to get ready for Joe Burrow.
One of the other big things we haven't really talked on, Jarrell Casey was traded for a 7th-round pick.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So that's kind of just at the last second gets traded to the Broncos for dirt cheap.
And, we mentioned this earlier, Calais Campbell gone from the Jaguars to the Ravens. That was only for a 5th-round pick. That is insane as well. A great defensive lineman like Calais Campbell going for really nothing.
And the last thing here before we take a break, something to keep an eye on here now in the NFL, Sean Payton. We mentioned him earlier in the Saints. He has tested positive for the coronavirus, active as of now. He's the first player in the NFL to test positive for that. So we'll keep an eye on that, see if that transitions anywhere into the NFL. This is now news breaking.
I think that's the first person involved in a professional athlete or a professional sports league besides the NBA that's positive.
I want to say that's right. I can't verify that for sure, but I can't think of any other name. I know for a fact, though, that he is the first coach in general. I haven't heard any other coach that has tested positive. I'm sure some other coach has it and just doesn't know it yet or something like that. But Sean Payton is the first coach first player person in the NFL, rather, even to test positive for the coronavirus. So that's something to keep an eye on here. We're going to take a break here on Day-to-Day Picks.